They say it takes 10 years to find your voice in comedy. 10,000 hours takes 10 years to find this and this many years to find that. I think that's ultimately very pointless. But I understand the comfort of it.
I ran into Edgar, who's the director, on the way in, and I was like, I feel like this is a lot for what is basically gonna be like a couple comedians and like an improvised slideshow of pictures of underwear. And he's like, it's gonna be great. There's a lot of buzz.
That's what he said to me, there's buzz.
There's buzz, hey.
Buzz.
There's buzz. How did we get to this current political climate? They say the signs are everywhere, but where are they? I'll tell you, Red Cat, they were right here at Ross Dress for Less. They were right here. Sounds like a jazz nickname.
It does.
Ooh, Red Cat and Almond Bear Claw. You know what I feel like? Like there's just not enough content to justify this whole production. I'm like, okay, this is not a show. And then there's like all sorts of stuff being improvised. This is so dumb, and I'm just gonna have to be like sort of, like you said, like this is like 20 minutes, and like maybe it's interesting, but like they might not just be laughing at all. Now I'm like actually worried about like real problems. Like we don't, like this is not, what is happening? Like this is not a show, Chad.
I mean, it's not still yet.
It's tomorrow. So I know what you're doing.
What am I doing?
You're doing that thing that I've been a journalist. When you interview someone, you just if you stay silent long enough, they'll just start talking again. Not today, Satan.
Today is Friday, November 4th, 12:07. Last night, Christina's writing buddies decided I was the enemy.
They didn't say you were the enemy. They just said I shouldn't trust you at all, and that documentarians are worse than journalists. I think I've always wanted to do comedy, and I just never thought, maybe growing up in LA, but also growing up poor in LA, that just was never ever seemed like a thing that like real people do. It's so weird to think about, because I never really planned on being an art critic either. I was offered a job at a gallery, but running a commercial gallery is a lot different from being an art critic. And I thought that would be the logical next step, is to like, now I have a job in the art world. This is gonna help my career. But before comedy even entered my mind, it was starting to feel like a conflict of interest. It was a cool job, and I had a company card, and I was like going to art fairs all over the world and just having a really fun life. But I'm like, this is not really what's making me happy. I got fired from the gallery. I took that as like a sign of like just doing more comedy really intensely. I started doing stand-up because it was just more flexible. So I just Googled Los Angeles open mics. And I went to the first one that was nearest to my house.
Christina Catherine Martinez!
And then I kept doing it. I think I went to open mics like almost pretty much every night for like a year at least.
He sat me down and he goes, Christina, you know no one has any idea what you're talking about on your stand-up, right?
And then I remember being at like an open mic, I think probably in like someone's garage, and there's like 12 people there, but they were laughing. And I was like, oh no, this is it. When I first started doing stand-up, I was so locked into the writing process that I wasn't having a lot of fun on stage. Then I was like, started doing a bunch of clown stuff. And when I learned how to be a little bit more in my body, then I just got like just super loose and was like not writing at all.
Clowning traditions come a lot out of being in your body and finding the humor that exists within all of us.
It's this combination of like ranty energy and virtuosic skill based on anyone's specific background. And then it can break into like heavy movement and be beautiful dance and be very emotional and then become completely absurd again and always like had an element of danger.
Stand-up, so much of it is being vulnerable, but also controlling the narrative. The audience sees you and they think you're the expert. But when you're a clown, they think you're the novice. And I think that's why when people get that first laugh off of failure, when they actually have people love them because they're going out there and they're just making a mess, creating chaos, failing at the task that they're chasing, that's a one-of-a-kind rush. I want you to do this. I want you to put your feet like this. Okay, I want you to bend your knees. Now watch me. I want you to do what I'm gonna do. Ready? That's all you have to do, all right? Stay with me in your eyes, okay? Don't break the cameras. Don't forget. Do you think that was even 4% right? What happened?
I don't know, I think I'm overthinking what you're trying to teach me.
You're overthinking literally the simplest physical movement I could possibly give you. It's 100% great that you're failing. But like, how can you turn this failure into their joy? Now imagine you're doing this with an audience. Imagine you're convincing an audience that this foolishness, this simple task that you're trying to do, has grave importance.
Yeah. Is this your attempt at clowning?
This is my clowning attempt.
You
This is the inspiration from the show.
Oh, now I'm going to direct you like Chad does.
Okay.
As clowns, we can fail upwards. You know, we can keep doing our best, messing up, finding new solutions, even worse than the last solution. And still this audience is cheering us on, the way you cheer on people you love. You know, that's what we do with our children. That's what we do with our pets. All these things that make them imperfect, and we love them for it. Not in spite of it, we love them for it because we feel more connected because that's us, right? That's all of us.
That was incredible. You ruined it at the end.
Bryce is film theory.
No, like something
An
like
old,
sculpture.
but you you minored in old barrels.
I was an acting major.
Oh! Yeah, you're on the wrong side of the camera. We need to get Bryce into clown.
Dude, clown was actually my favorite class. For my final, I ate a box of tissues.
Oh, that's a pretty good clown bit.
Yeah, it was pretty. I brought tissues, and I was going to be blowing my nose, and then everyone started booing me, and the lead clown was like, "Well, Bryce, they're booing you. You got to do something different." And I panicked and just started shoveling them into my mouth. And then about halfway through, someone shouts, "They're lotioned."
Oh.
Which I didn't realize because I was so focused
That's
on...
real clown stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It
You know
was-
that we're clowns.
You're clowns.
Yeah.
Trained clowns.
Yes.
Cool.
Classically trained.
Do a clown.
What have we been doing this whole time? What do you think this is?
Are you
What
kidding me?
Oh my God, the world
clown?
is do a clown. Let's go home. Let's go home. Jesus Christ.
My whole life, I've been told to sit, to stay. And no one just gave me permission to feel. It's never me. It's never me. I'm 5 years old. You know, my career is half over, but it is it's rough.
I was working at a startup. It was flexible enough that there was a point in which I was using my PTO to tour and do comedy in other cities. And there was a point where I just was able to have a really frank conversation with my supervisor about going down to a half-time position so that I could focus on comedy. And I think that was really surprising to my family. The startup was also a really good job that I just saw as a day job. And they were like, wait, you want to do less of that, try to do more of this? I think when I said oh yeah, I'm trying to go part-time at my job in order to focus on comedy, They were like, oh, you're still doing that? I don't think it was real to them until like I got on TV or like got a manager. That's not fair to, frankly, me or anyone who does something creative. That it's not real or valid until it's your income. Like, that's bull. When I was at my most broke in doing comedy, I was just like absolutely at my happiest. And it doesn't preclude still my need for security, but I made a mental note that like you have to remember how happy you are right now, because this is the brokest you've ever been and this is the happiest you've ever been. So like maybe it's time to rethink my priorities.
Because at the end of the day, I know that I'm a good girl.
Hi, Club Gigi. How are you tonight? No! I'm kidding. Thank you so much for letting me host. I'm not supposed to be here right now. I was supposed to go into marketing. I was supposed to do something totally different with my life. I majored in theater, but then I would go home and I would just stay in my dorm and market. Just till like 2 or 3 in the morning every night. Not counting the pandemic, I've been doing this for 6 weeks, and I'm still trying to find my voice. Sometimes it comes out as aggression. I'm so sorry. And sometimes it's like, oh, I do like a lot of like abstract things, with my body, because my body's my instrument or whatever. It's just more like a public high school clarinet, It's a little beat. Only weird kids' mouths have been on it, and ultimately it's owned by the government. I like the mixed reaction. I like a mixed reaction because it had the structure of a joke, right? But it was a little sad. Growing up, first generation mixed race immigrant, it's, if you've read any personal essay in the New Yorker for the past 20 years, it's a lot like being caught between two worlds. And, every 5 or 6 months, like a white editor from New York holds a knife to my neck and says, tell us what it's like being caught between two worlds. But it's hard because I don't feel like I belong in either identity. And I remember specifically that when I turned 15, my mom told me that I wasn't Mexican enough to have a quinceañera. Can I get that louder? That was really nice. Oh. That's better than laughter. And as I got older, I realized it wasn't that I'm not Mexican, it's just that we grew up so poor, they couldn't afford it. I just thought it was interesting that she used an excuse of not being Mexican as a pretext for not throwing this party, because frankly, I can't think of anything more Mexican than being poor in America. Wow. That was another example of, it had the form of a joke, and then the content was simply too sad. Just laugh. Oh my God, now you're forcing it. Now you're faking it. God.
One of the most important pieces of advice someone told me like early on was that if you have a bad show, you're only allowed to mope about it for however long the show was. So, it's because time's up.
I think Christina has a choice to make when it comes to like stand-up and clown, but it's really a personal choice on where she wants her career to go. Where she's at right now, I do think it's like, if you want your career to look more familiar as a stand-up, you probably do need to streamline. But if you're willing to just keep generating brilliant work and keep going to the places that love and adore you, eventually you're just going to have enough gravitational pull. You can have enough weight behind your act and your name that you just write your own ticket. I can understand her trepidation because sometimes you see other comics following a more conventional route, getting places seemingly faster. But if you don't get there on your terms, I think it's harder when you get there to then say, actually, this is who I am.
Christina Catherine Martinez.
Hello? Hello? Welcome to Aesthetical Relations, everybody. Thank you. A lot of people ask, what is aesthetical relations? And I hope you packed a blanket because aesthetical relations is actually a 3-day symposium on the work of George Lopez, oft maligned and highly misunderstood Latinx. Dare you. Artist. But I'm kidding. We're here to laugh. And have a good time. So just some housekeeping. This is a like culturally like a really important show. So but just make sure if you are going to use your phone, use the relevant hashtags. Hashtag aesthetical relations. Hashtag Los Angeles. Hashtag art. And of course, hashtag blessed. So we are here. This is a real photo. I took this photo. This is where we are now. This is where we might be soon. This is somewhere in between. It's a bit banal living through the end of history. Nervous chuckle, yes. And it doesn't have the cinematic feel that it used to. I thought it was going to be much more Mad Max and we'd all be wearing like very sexy aluminum foil things, kind of. And I was thinking a lot about how, as theorists, which we all are, that we find signs of history in the banal objects of the everyday. And for me, this is really my Paris in terms of critical engagement. I mean, I took this photo too. This is our historical process. How did we go from this to this to this to this? So I hope you. So please bear with me, because I really think what you're going to see next is quite literally the future of comedy. I'll tell you this, I didn't want to get personal in this show. But I usually don't like making cultural references in my comedy because I was homeschooled. And I grew up in sort of a conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical Christian church. And those two things, I didn't grow up in a cult per se, but I think the sum of these two things constitute more than the sum of their parts in, well, a rather cult-like fashion. Wouldn't you say so, Jack?
Anything you say, Ms. Martinez.
So while you're all out there blindly flailing about in the waves of historical process, I'm just frolicking along the shore, covered in peanut butter. But what does this mean? It's not easy being me. It's not easy bringing the critical eye to the everyday. And I really did take all of these pictures in the same Ross shopping trip. Kind of just really putting those, well, I didn't go to grad school. I learned criticism on the streets. But, when you see stuff like this, what does that say about historical process? You tell me. shop for the missus, right, Jack?
Every Valentine's Day, Ms. Martinez.
You think fitting in is gonna help you? No. You think there's safety in numbers? No. What is... And I will say that Ross Dress for Less can address larger themes as well. Some of them will take longer than others. We are not all schooled at the same level, and that's okay. Don't force it. Don't feel like you have to make yourself laugh harder to seem smarter than your neighbor. Okay, man, this is still going. This is a mirror. It's a mirror facing the shampoo aisle with an assistance button. Like, you don't know how to use a mirror? Oh, I don't need a mirror. I have a smartphone with unrealistic images of women.
Well, they say it takes 10 years to find your voice in comedy. But I think I can do it in 15.